Apart from that,
Leeds in crisis.
Leeds in crisis. Well, you said it, Phil. So they can't blame me now. It is 4020, not live. See, whenever we do this on a Tuesday, things happen. Philly's here, I am here, and we are here to talk about rugby league. We've got a guest coming up in a bit, which as ever we've recorded, and we'll pretend we haven't.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I do that on the radio now. On this radio thing I do. I was recording something on Friday night, and then I forgot, and I said, and I went all through saying this afternoon because it was Saturday afternoon, and then said, "Oh, tomorrow." Don't lie to the people because they'll find out anyway. And the good news, Phil, today is not the England night squad because they aren't playing anyone yet. But it is good news that the squad exists and the players will be able to get some from swag. As we all know, that's the most important thing in rugby league. I know in my brief spell working for a club that the most exciting thing was getting some gear. No, I don't work there anymore. I've still got the gear, so that's good. Stick it on eBay. As if I was Keith Senior. But the good news today is that if you lose your job as a head coach in Super League, you might get another one in the future. Because as we see too many times, people lose their jobs and never get another chance. But Lee Radford is back. And he will be the head coach of the Castleford Tigers in 2022. Which is good to see him back in the game because he's a nice chap from everything we know, apart from when people want to fight him, which I don't really understand what that story's all about, but we'll leave that for now. John Davidson said he was going a couple of weeks ago, and lo and behold, there he is at the Jungle, the new man. And I guess a different kind of coach to Darryl Powell, but another British coach, young British coach. I think that's still fair to call him young. Given a chance by the Tigers. They haven't gone and got some assistant from Australia we've never heard of. At least Radford has a record that's tried and tested. Back-to-back Challenge Cups. It's good. It's good for him. Do you think it's a good fit for the Tigers?
Yeah, I think it fits the word. You look at people who naturally fit with clubs, and I think Lee Radford and this desire to be close-knit and creating something around him that everybody can buy into. He's going to be able to do that at a club like Castleford. The only big question that remains is what resource will he have? And clearly he will have asked that question and he must have been satisfied with the answers coming back. There's quite a lot of players off contract there, so he gets the opportunity to reshape the squad, which he would want to do, but he'll need to know that he has the finance behind him to do that. Now, it may well be that a couple of players will move on, and that will give him the finance to do it. He will now have 6 or 7 months to have a look at that team, decide what its strengths and weaknesses are, look at the areas that he wants to enhance, be told the areas where there might be gaps in the future that there aren't at the moment. I think he'll go and have a look at the players that perhaps have done a job for him and are now either surplus to requirement at other clubs and get them on board. There's bound to be stories about his relationship with Liam Watts, who clearly is an integral part of what Castleford are doing. But
this is why I can't wait for Monday's League Express to see what his dad says about it.
But the thing about that is I saw Lee interview before he accepted this job saying he still speaks to Adam Pearson on a regular basis. So, never say never in anything. Just because at a certain point in time somebody was deemed to be not doing something that was for the best value for the team and were moved on, doesn't mean that when you're reintroduced to them, then in the right place at the right club and you want to then elevate them to be somebody who you can channel exactly what you want on the field through. So I don't even see that as an issue. I think he's clearly going to have some very, very good players already there, some good youngsters that are coming through. He may want to reshape the side a little bit, but I think you're right. Keeping him in the game is very important. I'd far rather see him as coaching Castleford than the defensive coach at Denver Rugby Union Club that would have done nothing to enhance the reputation of rugby league. And he's a good talker I think, again, he's somebody who, in terms of you can sell to a wider world, he says interesting things. He's got a great reputation within the sport. He's acknowledged now, since he left Hull, that the time was right for both parties, however much that may well have hurt. I don't think anybody's going to take away from his CV what he achieved in getting them to win back-to-back Challenge Cup finals at Wembley, something which the club had never done before, and the fans will be eternally grateful for. So his reputation and stock is very high. Cass have moved quickly to fill the void that clearly Daryl Powell is going to leave. Leaves a really interesting question though now, that if for any reason whatsoever, and they probably put in the second best performance of the week, that Warrington decided that Steve Price wasn't going to stay to the end of the year, then you can see that coaching merry-go-round now has all of the dominoes in place, that if Daryl Powell needed to move earlier to Warrington, he could, because Lee Radford is already available and could move into Castleford. I don't think any of that's going to happen, but clubs are insuring against worst-case scenarios, and that can only be a good thing, and I think he'll be a welcome spectator for the rest of the season, and he'll have his notebook out already, and he'll be excited and making plans, and it works. He lives, clearly near Cass, and everybody benefits. It's a good appointment. There'll be a huge sigh of relief in places like York and London as well, that they now don't have to worry about their coaches going anywhere.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because unlike Warrington, where their next coach is employed by another club in the same competition, Lee Radford is, twiddling his thumbs at home, doing whatever, probably watching lots of Castleford games and stuff at the minute. But you almost want him to be involved somehow at the club now, just so he hits the ground running when he does take over officially. But whether Daryl Powell would want that, whether Lee Radford would indeed want to do that, on how it would upset the balance within the club, I don't know. It's a strange situation, but as you say, it's almost better to be Castleford in this situation than to be Warrington.
I think the important thing about that is it's not going to affect anything that's happening on the field this season. There's absolutely no way Lee Radford will be saying to Daryl Powell, I'd like to see this guy selected this week because I want to know what he's going to be like next year. I think it's more recruitment and retention. I think Daryl will quite obviously realise that the way Castleford move forward now is not his primary concern, and while he's having meetings with the Warrington board about what he wants when he gets there next year, Lee will be having exactly the same meetings with the Castleford board. So no, this is the way of modern sport, and I think we're really pleased to see him back, and the personality we need. Just the one thing that I've really enjoyed this week is what Zach Hardacre has come out with for Wigan. He has quite categorically said, I am the best fullback in the competition. And, Sean Wayne may think it's Sam Tompkins. A lot of people are talking to me about how good Jake Connor's been this year, who I happen to be facing on Thursday night. But I think I am the best all-round fullback in this competition, particularly on defence. Great. Let's have some more of that. And I think Lee is in that category and camp as well. If Lee thinks something and it's valuable to say it, he's going to say it. He's not going to be overly politically correct about it, and that's great, and we'll move the game forward with people like Lee involved.
I wonder who will be working with at Castleford as director of rugby, or whether indeed they're Haying Point, another director of rugby after John Wells' departure, whenever that is, sooner rather than later. He's getting a lot more opinionated on the telly, I've noticed now, since his announcement has been made.
I don't think they will appoint a director of rugby. I think that is a clear cost saving at a time where money is extremely tight. And I think, again, Lee would have wanted the assurance, if he was taking the job, that he could do it in the way he wanted to do it, and he could get in the players he wanted to get as best he could. So I don't think they'll appoint another director of rugby. It'd be interesting to see what the backroom staff is like at Castleford, because clearly it would appear that with Lee Breers announcing this week and Andrew Henderson that they were leaving Warrington, that Daryl will be taking Ryan Sheridan and maybe somebody else from Castleford, which is fine, because that leaves Lee a blank sheet of paper to bring in who he wants. But is he going to, for example, go to Wakefield and try and tempt Andy Last to join him again at Castleford? There'll be some interesting move behind the scenes, I suspect. And I know Andrew Henderson was being considered as in the running for the Castleford job. He's now not going to be at Warrington. will he go to Castleford even as Lee's assistant? So there's still some mileage to be played out in all of this. But both clubs, I think, have done really well for how they move forward next year and got it sorted out early. So absolutely everybody knows where they are. Speculation ends, and two of our best British coaches, and that can only be good.
Yeah, and the good news is for the likes of Henderson and Breers and everyone else is someone's likely to get sacked at some point in the near future. So there'll always be a job somewhere, unless they give it to some unknown Australian assistant, and so on and so forth. On the field in Super League last week, St Helens snuck past Huddersfield. I think Huddersfield, and this is where people have been, they haven't won apart from this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. I think they've always been unlucky in so much as they run a fixture, but also Ian Watson's got to get his feet under the table there at Huddersfield. And, they ran Saints Close, who I think we've said before on this programme, and they're the best team in the competition, but they are a frustrating team to watch because they don't kill off teams the way they should. I compare them to the women the other week who absolutely obliterated Radford. The men don't do that in the same way, which I don't know what that is, but they almost play within themselves at times. But as a Saints fan told me last week, you don't win the Super League title in March.
No, I think the coach who would have been probably the most, relieved after that game would have been Ian Watson. And I know that clubs are now sort of 4 games into the season, and you do hit a point where you put in a lot of training, you played a lot of games, you will have flat spots. So I think Christian Wolff will be pleased to have got out of that game with a victory, but he knows that, as you say, that at some point you need to hit 4th, 5th, 6th gear, and his side maybe haven't done that throughout the 80 minutes yet. They've got it in them, absolutely. And I think the saving grace for him more than anything will have been Lewis Dodd coming off the bench and actually, really making a difference. But I loved what Ian Watson said after the game, that, babies don't walk as soon as they're born was a wonderful quote. You've got to learn how to do things. He's changed quite a lot of key personnel. He has changed the way they want to play, and that doesn't happen overnight. As he said, you don't just buy a team, put it on the field, and it begins to win. You've got to decide who you are, what you are, the ethics, the patterns, the structures. And you can only do that in matches. You can only do it on the back of setbacks. It's refining. And I think every week they've looked a little bit closer to what he wants them to be. And I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up their first win this weekend.
You've mentioned him being Zach Hardacre. Wigan beat his former side, Castleford, 22-12. Close game again. Cass's first defeat of the season. And Bevan French was back for Wigan. So Adrian Lamb now every week he's going to be asked the same question. And not just by members of the media, but by Zach Hardacre himself. I mean, as Scoy would say, knocking on his door, asking why he's not playing in the number 1 shirt.
I think if they can play as well as they did this week, with French on the wing and Hardacre at full-back and Hastings pulling the strings in the halves, they won't be changing anything in the near future. It works. They have got unbelievable strike threat if they can get the ball in the right places. And as you saw with one of the French tries, kicking into space behind the team, you've got one of the fastest guys playing on the wing. It's almost impossible to defend that. So they're not weakened by playing Bevan French on the wing. If necessary and he needs to slip into the halves, he can. If they've got injuries and he has to play at fullback, he can. The same with Hardacre. If he needs to play in the centre because they can't keep playing second rowers there, he will. But I think what we've seen, even in glimpses so far, is that Hardacre is the fullback for as long as he's fit. Hastings is pulling the strings for as long as he is there, and French, if it means him playing on the wing all this season, not going to detract. They looked really, really solid again this week against a good Castleford side that just couldn't break them down.
Friday nights, Hull Kingston Rovers 26, Leeds Rhinos 6. Richie Myler's got a 2-match ban for questioning the integrity of a match official. which people have got upset about because you get the same for hitting someone in the head with your shoulder, but that's whataboutery. That's not the same thing. From what I understand, well, Richard Agard pretty much said it after the game. Leeds weren't very good. Hull KR, impressive.
Yeah,
let's take nothing away from Hull KR. That's what we need to do.
Well, that's the one thing I was going to say, that you can focus as much as you like on how poor Leeds were, and they were. I mean, they just had one of those days where they look like a collection of individuals who hadn't played really well the 3 weeks before, and they have got issues to address, and they need to do it quickly because they're in a run of defeats, and you want to get out of that as quickly as you can. The Richie Milo one, if he has abused a match official, fine, no problem with the ban that he gets for doing that. I think there is a different conversation that needs to be had about consistency over players that should or shouldn't be sent off for attacks to the head, and then what they should get as and when they come up in front of the judiciary. But no, if you abuse a match official, then yeah, I think we would support the banning of the player that does that, and it is out of character for him. And it was the I think mounting frustration in a game where they just couldn't get the game going, and that was almost the last throw of the dice to have any chance of salvaging. It was more I think, a reaction to the way the team was playing than the decision of the official, although there were, I think, 27 stoppages in the game, which didn't help either team, and actually makes Hull KR's performance even more commendable. But what I would say is that two things that distinguish those teams on Friday night: energy and invention. Hull KR had it all, and Leeds had very little. I think there is something building there at Hull KR around young players who really now understand what Tony Smith wants out of them. But the guy who I think deserves the most credit for their performance, aside from clearly the man of the match because he scored a hat-trick of tries in Kane Lynette, is Ryan Hall. He has made an absolutely massive difference in a short time to that Hull KR side. Not just the milestone and the landmark of being the second person to ever get 200 tries in Super League, but he now gives them an outlet when they're under pressure in terms of position in the field. We've seen him do it so many times for England, Great Britain, and throughout his whole of his Leeds career. He is a winger that takes pressure off his forwards. And while you've got the Regan Graces and the Tom Johnsons that are the wingers that are speed personified, what they now have is somebody who says, give me the ball where it's really, really tough, and I'll make you the yardage to get you into the right place on the field where guys like Matt Parcell and Jordan Abdul can do what they do best. And Hall has been revelatory for them. He was absolutely superb on Friday night, and all the excitement about what his try meant, and it is an astonishing achievement, is also that he has brought a different dimension to this team. And I think on what we've seen so far, Hull KR will not get relegated this year.
Yeah, welcome to our celebratory 185th episode of the show, which actually is the 187th. But who's counting these things? Who's counting?
Well, Ryan Hall was a genuine landmark. Let's say that.
How did they get that wrong? I don't know. Especially when you get an email every week, although I don't usually read down that far. Salford Red Devils beat Lee Centurions 34-8 as the League Super League extravaganza continues. I mean, we're going to speak to someone who could have had their club in the Super League later, and I didn't ask because it's not something you can ask, but every other team's almost dodged a bullet here, because I'm not sure exactly what Lee are getting out of this season other than not winning, which I don't know.
Yeah, I think the worry for Lee would be, again, that they managed a 40-minute performance. They were really good in the first half. They were ahead, but they fell away quite significantly in the second half. And that's, again, something to do with, that step up in level between the Championship doesn't put you under that intense pressure week after week after week, no matter who you play. And I think the other problem is Lee needed, we said it, 3 weeks ago, Lee needed to get some points on the board early in the season, and their golden moment was that first game against Wigan. Now this week, you're coming off a defeat and a poor second half. Who have you got? St Helens. It doesn't get any easier. And the longer you go taking heavier defeats, the harder it is to turn that around. It's nothing to do with your coaching staff. It's to do with the fact that you came together late. You haven't got the same quality and depth of player there. And it is almost like being presented with a poison chalice.
Coach might be under pressure, so I read, which I liken it to when Andy Kelly was under pressure in 2000 at Wakefield. I think after everything he's done to put him under pressure, I find it bizarre. But what can he do? What else can he do? There's only one aim for Lee this year, and that's to finish not bottom of the table, but with everything against them, it's almost an impossible, not an impossible task, but it's not the easiest task in the world. And what do people expect? I don't know.
Which they still might do. It could well be that, they'll win enough games against the teams around them to edge them away from the relegation zone, which must be the sole objective. But even if they did change the coach, and I hope they don't, John Duffy, as much as some of the players, deserves his chance to coach at the highest level. You can only work with the personnel you've got. So why would a different coach get different results? And I think that something that our very good friend Rod Studd keeps saying, that, it's not necessarily about how much you pay your manager. It's about the cattle that he's got to push about on that field and the quality of it. And through accepting the place in Super League, but being the last team to be even able to get to the recruitment table, no matter how much money they may have had, it's difficult. Then you bring people in like Brendan Elliott from Manly, who could be a very good sign for Super League, but he's injured. He may not play until 6 or 7 weeks into the season. You bring in Nathan Peets, who has a track record of being a good hooker in the NRL, but you're asking him to fly all around the world without a pre-season and immediately dominate proceedings. Again, that's demeaning our competition a little bit to expect him to be able to do that. So it's a difficult one. And I think they will have targeted their games. They will have known at the start of the season which matches they have to be 100% up for, and clearly they're the ones they'll be looking at. They'll be hoping that everybody's fit and on board. Making a change now would serve no useful purpose, I don't think. Although, was it Tim Sheen said he'd been approached during the week by a couple of clubs? Again. What? Yeah. Well, anyway, yes.
I wonder who those clubs could be. Hull beat Wakefield on the telly, 2014. But obviously the only talking part coming out of this game is Max Jarrett goes off before half time, doesn't come back. Looks like he won't be back this week because Wakefield have signed Ollie Ashall, Bolt and Luck from Widnes. To which fans moan that Wakefield aren't playing their own youth players well. I'd suggest, for all the people who want to criticise Chris Chester for everything, he's more likely to know if his players are ready to step up and play in Super League rather than ones from another club who might not. I don't know. But regardless of that, Faraimo gets sin-binned for, as you described it earlier, it's an attack on the head. We're just coming off the back of a pre-season in which a young player who was the captain of Leeds has had to retire due to concussions and the effect of. When are the players going to learn not to attack players in the head? And, late tackle or whatever, intent or whatever, accidental or whatever, you still know what could happen when you make that tackle and make that movement. And is the punishment enough? It certainly doesn't appear to be at the time.
I think Trent Robinson gave a magnificent press conference this week after the Roosters game, saying that what it needs is players to look at their tackling technique. It's a salutary reminder that we have issues in sport now with head injuries. These are really serious and important issues that are not going to go away, and that there needs to be adjustments. Now, those adjustments come in training, and they come in the heat of a match. And if you go anywhere near the head of an opponent, then you should be seeing a red card. And I thought that the Tetivano example was a perfect benchmark for how we were going to treat late attacks to the head, not least with the shoulder. And I think the fact that Faraimo has now been banned for that offence shows you that he should either have been sent, well, he should have been sent from the field, but clearly also, I think that there is an issue about the penalty you now give him, because if you are deemed that it has been foul play and that 4 matches is acceptable to rule that out, and that's the example you want to set, then you've got to set that example with consistency every time somebody comes up in front of the judiciary with a very similar kind of incident. Somebody will no doubt tell us that the two were different. I can only go on the television picture that we saw of the Faraimo incident. There didn't look to be enough difference there to define it as 2 games to me. I think also we do need to look at the 18th man. Saw it for the first time in the NRL this weekend when a player was sin-binned for attacking the head of an opponent. That opponent failed his HIA and couldn't come back, and it was immediately deemed that the 18th man could come onto the bench without a substitution penalty, and that the team that had been the victims didn't feel the penalty. Because again, it seemed to me as though Wakefield were far more inconvenienced by losing an outside back and not really having the resource on their bench to cover for that, for the second time this season that's happened. Whereas Hull were inconvenienced for 10 minutes and ultimately in the last 10 minutes managed to find the key play that won the game. So you warm up with an 18th man. If it's, I think the rule in Australia now, or the ruling is if you have 3 failed HIAs, he comes into play, or if you have any HIA that is the result of foul play deemed to be a yellow or a red card, it comes into play. Well, I think Wakefield would have benefited from that at the weekend, and something that we do need to look at. Again, I know Tony Smith has said we can't just dismiss out of hand that we're not going to do it. For me, that worked in Australia this weekend. And again, if as a responsible sport that is serious about taking on board the issues associated with concussions and their longer term effects, we need to look at stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, people who say, "Oh, the game's gone soft," should ask Stevie Ward if he thinks that, but they probably wouldn't listen to his answer anyway because they're idiots. But the game's tough enough without making it harder. And you're right, it is. Trent Robinson's right. It is up to the players to make sure they modify their behaviours. If you throw forward passes all the time and think, "Why am I getting called for all these forward passes?" That's because you keep throwing forward passes. If you keep getting sin-binned or sent off for attacking someone in the head, and again, we're not saying it's deliberate necessarily or whatever.
No, absolutely not.
It's part of the game. We've all seen high tackles that are just accidental. They just happen. The game's hard enough without things like this. That's why I know people don't like the shoulder charge was removed, but it was deemed that it would be safer without. Formula One is made safer all the time. And people, it's not the same as it was when everyone died in big fireballs and stuff. Well, there's probably a reason for that, isn't there?
You have to be cognizant, which is probably the right word in this respect, of the damage that is being done, inadvertent or otherwise, because the speed of the game is so much faster than it used to be. And that, some of the collisions that are causing HIAs are the force with which players' heads are hitting the ground in recoil from a tackle. Well, again, we got to be aware of the fact that all of that is becoming an issue, and we need to be seen to be dealing with it. So I'm sure the disciplinary on the website have made a case as to why Faraimo's punishment wasn't the same as Tetevano's, but to me, we eliminated things like the chicken wing tackle, because the penalty for the teams that were getting up in front of the judiciary meant that it was eradicated as a technique. We need to do the same with leading to the head, particularly with the shoulder.
I reckon, with no expert knowledge, that Frank Machin probably had some post-concussion syndromes in this sporting life, but I can't prove that.
He definitely did not play the following week.
The anger management with that spider, that's what I was saying. Things we didn't see coming. Catalans 8, Warrington 24. Did we ever get to the bottom of the Blake Austin passport mystery? Has everyone forgotten about that now? Regardless of, great performance from Warrington. As I said, didn't see that one coming, especially with the way Catalans have been travelling so far this year. But a big statement win for the Wolves, as they say.
Comprehensive second half. They were absolutely in control from minute 41 to minute 80. They were relatively fortunate, I thought, to be ahead at half time. They then capitalised on that with an interception try, and from that moment, it never looked as though they were going to lose. A little bit of over intricacy at times when the Dragons were attacking. I absolutely applaud the flamboyance of French rugby league and love watching it, but sometimes there is a time and a place to pass, and there is a time to actually be a bit more direct until you do start passing the ball. But the interesting thing now will be, and obviously we're recalling this before the squads are announced, what is Blake Austin's future at Warrington? Because it sort of worked. Matty Ashton at fullback looked really good. Ratchford in the halves. Austin gets left out, but that gives Widdop the responsibility to run the team around. I think Mamo at centre has to keep his place. Be really interesting to see what happens when Tom Lynham is fit again. Does he get his place back? Does Greg English start on the wing and gradually move into the centres? I think that almost inadvertently, Warrington found the perfect balance in their spine of their team. And if that doesn't include Blake Austin, he's leaving at the end of the year and making this conversation a circular one. Darryl Powell perhaps maybe doesn't see him as being a part of the future of the club in 2022. Then you're almost saying, which isn't the case, has he played his last game? Clearly he hasn't, because there's so many games to play and there'll be injuries for every club. But if they had a fit squad every week and could choose their preferred 1 to 7, would he be in it? And you'd have to say, on the way they played against the Dragons, without him, whether he had a passport or he didn't, no, I can't see. I think the answer is Widdop is playing very well at the moment. Leave him be in charge of the team. If that means leaving out Austin, maybe that is the portent of the way things will go for the Wolves.
Well, we'll talk about the Championship results later for obvious reasons. But Women's Challenge Cup action this week. Warrington, double for them this week, beating Huddersfield 38-12. I have to say, it was the first time I've seen Huddersfield play, and I'm told they're a very young squad, and they put up a decent account of themselves. Mm-hmm. Warrington, as I said last week, they've got some quality players in there, but again, they are being overrated by the bookmakers, but that's not the players' fault or the coach's fault. And York edging out Wakefield 16-10, having been 10-0 down, so great fight back for the Knights. Late try to win that one and see themselves into the next round of the Cup, and I guess having run Leeds close at the start of their game last week in the Super League, backed that up with an important win. And interesting results. Interesting to watch the Warrington Huddersfield game. Numbers appeared to be decent enough on Twitch. Go back into those later as well. But highlights on Sky as well. And again, as we keep saying, that's the most important thing, is visibility, and people will perhaps stumble along those and see them. So it's good stuff.
Again, massive credit to those at the RFL, particularly Tom Brindle, who are pushing the women's game forward. But it's now completely obvious why the commentary team on Twitch is the Sky commentary team, because then you've got your 15-minute highlights that are branded as a Sky product, and it makes perfect sense. That, as you say, is massive. It may only be quarter of an hour, but it's a really, really big quarter of an hour. And that crossover between a social media channel aimed at young people to the main broadcast, again, added value out of the women's game. Fantastic. I mean, whoever has come up with that's the kind of broadcasting deal that makes eminent sense and puts the sport in the spotlight way. I didn't see the Warrington Huddersfield women's game, but again, credit to the RFL for putting some of those Twitch highlights out as the game is happening, and just on the basis of at least one of the Huddersfield tries that I scored. Now, some great skill that is to be admired. So, some really good line running that led to a great try for, I think it was their young centre or second rower. And we will start taking more interest in the women's game because these highlights are being put in front of us, and a new audience built up, and the women's sport as a whole is on the rise. We can be part of it. I have no idea what Jon Flatman's going to talk about when he comes on, but I think the product might be something that perhaps comes into the conversation, and saleable product, and the value of perhaps the women's game as part of that overall product, and put it out there. People admire it. So I can only speak as an interested bystander on some of the netball I've watched this year. I am no further along from game 1 to whatever it is now as to knowing the intricacies and rules of the sport. But what I know is if it's on and I'm in the room, I'll watch it because it's all action. It's exciting. You're getting to know a little bit who the players are. You can appreciate the highly skilled moves. And we can do the same with women's rugby league.
There's a very important point to be made about netball, which I will come to in a minute because it ties into what we need to talk about after we spoke to the York chairman, Jon Flatman, who...
Oh, is he on?
He's going to magically appear down there. I think I'm here. I think I'm here, you're there, and he's down here. We'll find out when I press this button now. Jon, thanks very much for joining us on 4020 TV. Just into the start of the 2021 season. It must be nice after the curtailed events of 2020 to just get the team back on the field again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had a year off in essence, haven't we? A pretty a despondent and desperate year for many, many people, and it's just great to be back playing rugby league again. But also to hear and see, hopefully that we're coming to the end of a tough period for everybody, and there's positivity all round, and a huge part of that is having rugby league back on the field.
Yeah, it is nice to have some positivity, and one of the main positive elements at York at the moment is the fact that you've got a new home you've moved into, all nice and shiny and new. What will spectators expect to see when they eventually make their way into the York Community Stadium?
Yeah, it's very shiny and new, almost unused shiny and new, which is something we're definitely looking to change and get fans back as soon as possible. So, hopefully what they'll see is what they've seen on broadcast so far, which I think is a vibrant stadium. It's a stadium full of colour, and that's, merely just by the seats, but also an environment which, to our fantastic sport. It is, is what you would expect from a 21st century stadium, so to speak, in terms of amenities and parking, but it also gives an event basis in terms of what's around the stadium as well. So it's what happens on the pitch, and you get a great view of that, and you get to see it from in a great environment, which is close to the pitch as well. But also you've got everything that comes with what you'd expect in terms of car parking, cinemas on board, restaurants very close by, leisure centre. It's a whole day out event kind of structure now. So it's it's befitting of a sport that wants to move forward.
You're a student of the game. You always have been. You've been involved in a number of roles in the sports. So just an easy one to lob in at the beginning. What do you think the state of the game is at the moment?
I think the issues around the game are quite prevalent across other sports as well, and I think we need to put that in context. But we're in a different generation that are coming through now, and being our consumers or our fans or our customers, however you want to use it. There is a very tech generation. There is a generation that wants things instantly, and there is a generation that is quite happy with change and likes new things and regularly visits new things. And one challenge that the game's got is to move forward and embrace those people. And that's a challenge for all sports. We've got a different broadcasting profile. People are consuming, they're spending and consuming their leisure time in a very different way than before. And we've got to move with those times and ultimately provide a product that people want to watch. And there is an appetite for it and there's a desire for it. But more importantly than that, there's probably an awareness that it exists in the first place. So we've got to match all those things together. You
mentioned moving forward. You're in a city that obviously offers immense opportunity for the sport to garner a new audience, if you like, in North Yorkshire. Can you do that without unity, and is there sufficient of it at the moment in the game? I mean, obviously, we saw last year when 2 years ago now, the Super League broke away and there was resistance from the Championship clubs. I think we saw that there was a concern about this whole game approach that we need to adopt. Do you feel that still needs addressing, or are we in a position to move forward?
I think the game is stronger when it's more than just the sum of its parts. I think that's my first point, and let's ensure we get to a position where every part of the game celebrates the success of every other part of the game and buys into that success and gets the benefit of that success. But fundamentally, one thing that has stuck with me for many years after someone who's still in the game now said a good while back is that clubs are responsible for their own club's growth. And if every club is delivering growth as an individual, then it will get value from those other clubs delivering their growth as individuals to the sport of a whole. So primarily, yes, everything's better in unity and everything's better joined up. And we must be moving towards that position, as everyone should be striving to do. But clubs are responsible for their own attendances. Clubs are responsible for producing players, and clubs are responsible for their own marketing, and clubs that take on that responsibility and understand that is their responsibility primarily, hopefully given the right environment, will be able to do that, instead of moving away from a scenario where potentially you get to it's someone else's fault why my organisation isn't better. Well, that doesn't normally happen in the real world. So it shouldn't really happen in this sport either. So, the responsibility sits firmly, and clubs understand that with each club to deliver their growth and then buy into the bigger story.
Well, York's certainly a club which has grown extremely quickly in the last few years from a position of having to start all over again. One of those key figures involved is obviously your coach, James Ford. Tell us a bit more about him and how hard it is to keep him at the club, because every time there's a job comes up, it seems these days he's linked with that.
Yeah, he's a key part of what we do. He's the face of the club. Ultimately at the end of the day, and he's the person that has the most direct influence over our key staff, which are our playing staff. He is absolutely pivotal to all that. He sets the standards. He drives huge amounts of the philosophy, and one of the scenarios with James being approached by other people or being linked to other jobs is, your key staff should be being approached by others. Your key staff should be at the top of a hit list when people are looking to recruit, because that means you've got someone doing a good job. And that will forever be the case. The top football managers are regularly talked about when the top jobs come up, because they are the top football managers. So it's a credit to James. It's probably a credit to the club and the environment that he's in, that when the top jobs come up in Super League, his name is linked. To date, that's as far as it's got, from my perspective, and long may that continue. But we've got to create a scenario here where James wants to stay, and James is in a position where we're given the resources to grow and allow him to grow. But ultimately, we want James here to coach, and that really is where it starts and ends.
And you didn't breathe a huge sigh of relief when Castleford appointed Lee Radford to. The Championship's looking as though it's going to be possibly the most exciting division of all the three this year, which is not to decry League One, which hasn't kicked off yet. Can it have integrity if Toulouse can't find opponents to play, or do you think they are going to have to base themselves over here for a little bit of a while and play some matches?
Oh, the Toulouse question linked to the integrity question is one that's a natural question, Phil. I understand that, but I do sometimes have to think twice when we consider this concept of it, an integrity in the sport and what that really means. To that team that go out there, whether Toulouse complete the season in the UK or don't complete the season, that team that goes out there in the Championship this year and finishes top of the ladder and wins the grand final, you try telling those blokes who have put that much effort in that the integrity is lacking. They will have earned every single result they've got out there. They will have put their bodies on the line, and their clubs will have put them in a position to do that. So we want to be careful about getting into the definition of what a season with integrity means. Do we mean as we started off the season? Well, no, because things are going to change and evolve throughout the year. We know that. Are we talking about everyone playing each other home and away once? No, but we haven't had that for a very long time, ever since we've had Summer Bash and Magic and loop fixtures. So I think there's a question around defining what that season with integrity means. If you mean, do the team that come top and win the grand final on the current format have the right through fairness to go up, then absolutely I agree that they will, because they will have earned it. This is a really tough competition, predominantly with part-time players, for good or for bad. Where you are traveling, you are doing travelling, you are training, and you are putting your body on the line every week. The team that comes top of that comp and wins that grand final will absolutely have done it and earned the right to the benefits of becoming top.
And would you feel happy playing Toulouse in a grand final if they hadn't played as many games as you had through no fault of their own? And if they won that game, would they be deserving to go up? I think the integrity is more on for them rather than the rest of the league, because they're being hampered by being full-time, if you like. I
think you've got a unique set of statistic situations here, Phil, that are coming together. And one is we've got a French team in a predominantly English competition, which clubs embraced and clubs accepted. And Toulouse accepted that they are not taking part in their own domestic competition. They're taking part in if you like, the next rung up, if you like, if that's the right way of putting it. And you are in a situation where we have had an unprecedented pandemic. And a pandemic in which the rules around movement across countries are set very politically by central government. This is not an RFL agenda. This is not a club's agenda. This is a situation where the government is setting the rules around quarantine, red lists, amber lists, vaccines, passports, etc. So are Toulouse, the question really to ask is, are Toulouse doing everything they possibly can within the constraints that they've got to play their fixtures? And the argument back the other way of the UK clubs is, are the UK clubs doing everything realistically within the powers they can to complete the fixtures? If both those situations are occurring, by independent decision, not by clubs making that decision, and that's where the RFL come in, and both of those are complied to and they're happy with it, well, absolutely Toulouse should be in the grand final if they've earned the right, and if they win it, they go up. If situations change and people decide not to go, or the rationale is questioned, well, that's where an integrity question comes in from the RFL's perspective. But we've played Toulouse here. They put on a charter plane to come and play here. We did everything we could on that day to make it as easy for Toulouse as possible and to prepare them, to have a fair contest. They did, and by heck were they a good side on the day. So from that basis, they've gone to Halifax and done similar last week. So let's hope the travel restrictions are ones that is a byproduct of the season, because we're opened up and we're all good to go.
I want to ask you about your recruitment for this season, John, because you brought in a lot of very experienced Super League talent. Obviously, it was a very late decision as to which club would replace Toronto in Super League for the start of this season. But what was the theory behind bringing in so much experienced talent for this season?
Well, I think the recruitment went sort of two ways, really. It was I think we focused on certain positions that we thought we needed to build upon. And we also looked at the market and who was available and who would fit into the culture, but who also would provide a little bit more leadership, as opposed to being a young side full of energy and enthusiasm, which got us to a really good position. We probably felt we needed a little bit more of the experience and maybe a little bit of that extra Super League class, for the bigger games or for when it really mattered. So it's two sides. There's the theory and then there's the reality of who's available on the market, who wants to come and what they'll come for. So, I'm really pleased that the people we've got, traditionally in terms of Kermond and Cuthbertson, etc., have traditionally been leaders in their environment. Research that we've done is that they are good people and they were coming, for the right reasons. And we, part of their role is bringing the younger, less experienced players through. So we're really happy with the recruitment. I think across the game, for the element that's worth, I think the recruitment's been seen as a positive, but ultimately it all happens on the grass, doesn't it? So that's the beauty of it.
I was going to say, you've been very active in the loan market as well since the season started. Picked up some really good fringe Super League players, young with a point to prove. How do you think that's going to work out in the Championship this year, bearing in mind, obviously, we don't have the traditional dual registration that we've had?
Well, I think that's the needs must, really, in that instance of, we weren't planning to go to the loan market so hard so early. But, I think we played Wigan in the Challenge Cup and we used 16 players and we had an unused sub on the bench who couldn't go on. And out of a squad of 28, that's pretty severe, pretty early. And that included playing two 17-year-olds who, were great, by the way. But it's not an environment. It's not the game you'd naturally drop a 17-year-old into. That loan going to the loan market early wasn't planned. It was injury led. But when we look back at it, some of those injuries were freak incidents. But also we'd played Hull FC, a full-time team in pre-season. We'd played London, who were full-time. We'd played Toulouse, who were full-time. And we'd played a very, very good Sheffield team, in the build-up games. So we'd had it, we'd played at the top end of the competition, if you like, in some tough environments. I think that loan market will fall away, unfortunately, for everybody. And I think it will fall away because of the sheer volume of players that Super League clubs will go through when they are, in essence, playing back-to-back weekends on a more regular basis. This is the toughest game. We all know it's a tough game at the best of times. Fixture schedules, period of time away from the game, the summer months when it all kicks in and the grounds are hard. I think everybody's going to go through far more players than they have before. So therefore, by that nature, there won't be those players available to loan.
You mentioned at the beginning that every sport has been going through what rugby league has, and we shouldn't look at ourselves necessarily as being in a unique position. But also, you're in the division where's that mix of part-time and full-time. Can we continue in that vein? Does it work? Do we need to think about how we perhaps split those two elements of the game? And if you're in one, do you have to have a route to get to the other? Because that would be awkward in many respects.
Phil, I know it's a passion of yours, this, and we've had several conversations about the part-time and the full-time split for many years. I think there are a few things that have come out, quite surprisingly to a degree, but also passionately from clearly the European Super League football issue. And I think one of those is the pathway and the dream. And the importance to fans of that dream, and maybe other parts of the game not understanding, what fans really want. And for me, it's always been about that hope and pride of being able to progress, and the dream. Whether the dream's realistic or not it's in the eye of the beholder to some degree. But whether you split the game full-time, part-time, whether you split them hybrid, however you go about it, I don't necessarily think you need to be as arbitrary as, you're a part-time team, you're a full-time team. I think some of that is dictated by finances. But you have to be absolutely 100% sure, if you're going to pull up the drawbridge, that you've got the right teams in the right competition. Not only for that year, but also for future years. So I think that's quite a big strategic piece of work, rather than simply, we're going to pull the drawbridge up now because of where everybody is now, and therefore that's it. But that's a far longer and far more diverse conversation than a quick question that you've just thrown at me there, Phil.
But it's something I know that you've been talking about as developing your club. It might not have been that exact argument as if you're full-time or part-time, but it's what you would need to be sustainable in Super League as it currently exists. And I know you've done a lot of work on that. You're looking at sort of North Yorkshire, we mentioned that before, as a new market of people that perhaps haven't previously engaged in rugby league, but there are a lot of moneyed people now up there, and there's a lot of corporate headquarters that you can tap into. You did a fantastic job with the Toronto game, because you pitched it at a different market whilst also including your traditional market as well? Are those the kind of questions we need to be asking and looking at the potential of clubs for the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think you can put the cart before the horse in this one, because we always talk about being full-time or part-time, but ultimately it's a combination. An increase in revenue, whether that's via the gate, whether that's via sponsors, or whether that's via an external investor, gives you those choices. But you have to be able to do that in the first place. And in order to be able to attract new fans, new sponsors, or new investors, you have to have a product that's got some potential to grow. And if you haven't got that potential to grow, it will be three things. And having any one of those, or three, or two of those three things, allow you to then be sustainable at the level of investment on the field that you require. So one of the great parts of the Super League application was that it made you, if you hadn't already, it made you fast forward in time to, if you had X central distribution, what could you do with it? Is your business model scalable? So when you increase the number of fans through the gate, does your stewarding bill, or can you increase the revenue to fund that? When you take on a squad bill of 1.5 million or 2 million quid, have you got the resources in the area to be able to, balance the books, so to speak? So it was a brilliant exercise for that. And I'm sure all those clubs that took part do have a roadmap now as to how they might get to a situation where they are spending 1.5, 1.75, 2 million on the cap. Will spending more on players create a better product and a better team? Yes, you would hope so. I think that's a given. But alternatively, that's all right for 1 year, but what happens the year after? So, as I say, without muddying the waters, it's a big piece of work, but does the York model scale up? I can only talk about York, and I know it does scale up. Did I know in detail before the Super League application that was the case? Probably not. But I've now got something to work at. And we know from the stadium point of view, it removes that barrier. We know from a training facility point of view what additions we would need to convert that from part-time to full-time. And we've started those discussions on the basis that those discussions will be just that until, or if and when we press the button for it. And in terms of the sponsorship opportunities, we know that the revenue that the stadium can now generate, can be up there to a level that would fund that full-time squad. So, there is always discussions around what's going on and where it can be, but that was a really nice, succinct project to be able to prove to yourself and to others that it does work.
When we talk about growing the club and indeed the sport in North Yorkshire, obviously we've got the World Cup coming later this year. Plenty of games being held in the city. How important is that going to be, not just for Rugby League, but for the York City Knights going forward?
Yeah, it's massive. The World Cup's huge. And the World Cup was always, any World Cup in any sport, World Championships, a coming together of nations creates conversations. York's an event-based city. It is used to big events. It attracts people, residents from within York, but also people from outside of York to come to York for big events, whether that's a Shakespeare Festival, or Balloon Fiesta, or the races. As just three examples, not to mention the tourism, the Jorvik, etc., etc. It is used to creating big events, and it needs to be a big event to get some cut through in York, or it certainly needs to be unique. That's what a World Cup does. A World Cup gives you that cut through. The council have backed it, both financially and other resources wide. The club are excited by it. It's a different it's got a nice twist on it in terms of the women's game, and the stadium has been built and is delivered to befit that situation, as I'm sure you've all seen on broadcast. So the World Cup is a massive, massive opportunity for us because it cuts into that event market that York really needs. York City Knights is never going to have the most season ticket holders, but it might have the biggest non-regular attenders, non-one-off regular attenders, if you like, due to that event nature. So we have to ensure that that any event that happens in York, or any match, if you like, that happens in York is an event. So hopefully we'll have a different match day feeling to others, created by the environment and by what we do.
And it's not been a bad start to the season for the women's team either, because they ran Leeds close early in the first Super League game and then beat Wakefield in the first round of the Challenge Cup. So some positive for the women's team as well.
Yeah, lots and lots of announcements in the next couple of weeks about York and the women's game. Without going into to spoil that, so to speak, right now, but just to make it clear that, you know, as an organisation, we have decided that, and I say this flippantly, but I say this, you know, with real meaning. The first job in 2016, the back end of 2016-17, was to get the men's team actually on the field. We had to get that men's team on the field, and we had to then build over a period of time the level of resource in that men's team to allow it to compete, certainly at the level it does now and beyond. In the in the last 2 years, we've had all the experiences around the stadium and COVID, and there's been resource allocated to that to make sure that the stadium is in a position where that's not a barrier. The next level of right investment in this club, as we grow the other two as well, is to give the women's game that due and fair in investment. We've got a lot of support locally for the women's game, and we hope to make some announcements in the next couple of weeks where we really do ramp up and, you know, and certainly contribute more to the Women's Super League, and the reason we're not at the moment, I've made this really clear, it's not the situation we have in place at the club, it's just the resource that hasn't been allocated to it yet. So we're ready to go, and you'll see something very shortly that might sort of raise a few eyebrows, but you know, we want to certainly get them men's games out in York.
You mentioned resource, and you were very keen early on to get the university involved at St John's. You've now got a fantastic facility that the teams are based out of, including the women's team. They've got access to some of the S&C and gymnasium stuff. How important has that been for you to be able to build the club?
Yeah, York St John are absolutely pivotal to what we do, and that, you know, they've had a change of vice chancellor, but apart from that, they're a pretty stable organisation. So it's allowed relationships to build, and they've got some absolutely fantastic people there with a real passion for sport and a passion for growing sport. The investment they've put into the training site, Phil, it's on a different level, and people are amazed when I showed them the 2 4Gs and the indoor sports barn and the changing rooms and the S&C. They've now added another, alongside the World Cup, where we've invested over 200,000. They've invested £500,000 for a rugby specific 4G. You know, it's as wide, the pitch is as wide as the LNER stadium is here. It's absolutely first class. And without that investment, we may be having a conversation where you say to me, what are the barriers to the next step for York? And I say, the training ground. That barrier's gone. The stadium barrier has gone. The opportunity for the juniors, the ladies and the men's to use all of those facilities in equal amounts is there. So, you know, I'm eternally grateful to the university for everything that they do for us. And again, they're a key part of the, you know, cog of the wheel, and the success that we have, I hope they share in, and I know they certainly appreciate, you know, the contribution that they make. I appreciate the contribution they make to the game.
One of the main features of any budgeting that you'll be doing both now and into the next couple of years is clearly based around TV monies. It's a hot topic and has been for a while. I think we are on the verge of Sky announcing what they're going to put into the game, whether they'll be trickled down or not.
What is it, Phil?
Around about 25 to 30 million over 2 years.
Right.
But it's less. The important thing is that it's less, and that may have a trickle-down option into what the Super League might release to the Championship clubs. There's also now talk of the Championship being able to finance their own deal. How confident are you that you've got a product that is saleable to a broadcaster and that you can fill any potential hole from a lack of Sky funding?
Am I confident in the product? I think there's 3 or 4 questions in there, but I think the first one, am I confident that the product of the Championship is saleable? Yes, absolutely. I think that it's watchable, it's exciting. The venues are, improving in terms of, broadcast, what it looks like on TV. The clubs are driven by return on investment model, which is increasing and improving standards across the board. Social media wise, a focus on attendance, and all those factors around governance. And I think the Championship is a fantastic competition, and I think the more people that get to see it, the more it will become more fantastic. And that's tremendously poor grammar, but you can understand where I'm coming. It starts to build and rolls on and on and on. Do I know what the broadcast environment is? No. I think the broadcast market is extremely disrupted. I think we've seen that in terms of the change that Sky have made over the last few years with the channels, with the impact of the streaming services, with the impact of pay-per-view, with the impact even Amazon into the Premier League. And I think we've got a really disrupted market, and I don't exactly know where it's going to fall, and I'm not sure anybody does. But again, let's go back to where clubs can do what clubs can do. Clubs can improve their attendances, clubs can improve their social media, clubs can improve their communication with the fans, and clubs can continue to invest and make the product better. Outside of that, we are determined by the market, and we will have to make changes if we have to make changes. If the cut is 50%, the cut is 50%, and we will need to work with that. There is a huge added value that the Championship gives to the sport. And clearly also League One. And that added value should never be underestimated. And I'm sure it is not. I am absolutely sure it's not underestimated by others. But we are ultimately the product of the sum of the parts. But each club's responsible for each part and really delivering and growing that. So I'm not worried about the future. I'm nervous, if that's the right term, but I'm certainly not worried. And I think that will pan out in due course. I just hope we get the opportunity to put this product in front of as many people as possible, who will then ultimately decide the true worth.
In terms of putting the product out there, England Knights have just announced a squad, but they clearly haven't got a fixture. Is this a case for thinking outside the box a little bit and saying they should play a Championship select side and maybe have that on a weekend that suits everybody, perhaps as a double header with another game that's going on, and get back to maybe showcasing what you've got in your division that way?
Yeah, Phil, and I think there's a great place to host that game as well. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's a new stadium in York. Might be a good spot to put it. The representative game is high profile this year, isn't it, with the World Cup? And with an opportunity here with nations coming over to do things a bit different. I'm sure those conversations are ongoing. And let's hope they are, and let's hope there's a bit of something different to the mix. In terms of the Knights, that's an exciting team to watch. That England Knights teams, it's the next generation. It's names that are known but maybe not picked up on regularly, and it's an opportunity to see them in action. So yeah, I think it'd be great to see an England Knights versus a Championship select team. However, that's for others to make that decision.
We just like to ask hypothetical questions you can't answer. That's one of our one of our things.
It's a good skill. It makes me waffle more.
Phil, have we covered everything? Because I think we might have done, but I'm not sure.
I just I can't imagine how excited you are about getting fans back. I mean, we've got this nominal date of May the 17th that hopefully we're all on target for. Of all the clubs that can't wait to get fans back in, you must be amongst the most excited just to show them around your fantastic facility.
Yeah, and we really are, but we've also got to be aware, everybody, that none of these deadlines are set in stone. And it's naive, we're all working towards this roadmap announced, probably 2.5 months ago now, which was loose and generic in its nature. Every club's probably going through what we're going through at the moment, which is we want to know the answers now. How many can we have in? When? What? All that. And simply the guidance isn't out there. And we'd love it to be, but it isn't. And there are some authorities who will just push back, and it may be June, it may be July. There are some who will say, yeah, press the button in May, that'd be brilliant. We're trying to hold back that enthusiasm. We cannot wait, though. Ultimately, we, as people involved away from performance in the club, have had keys to the stadium, if you like, since earlier mid-December. So we know what it's like. We've been around it. We've watched it improve, even in that time, in terms of branding and changing rooms. And we've managed to show the players around and seen their reaction. We've seen some of the media's reaction, who's fortunate enough to be able to come to the BCD games. And but the true reason the stadium was built with 8,500 seats and not just 10 for the media was that fans will experience it. So we absolutely can't wait. And we know it will go down positively. We just want to create a hot ticket, and those season ticket holders we thank for purchasing in advance. And as soon as we can get you in, we'll absolutely do that, I assure. And fingers crossed, and we are getting closer and more positive every day. That will be against Oldham on the 23rd.
Well, just one very final quick question. The only other venue you'd love to be at, presumably, would be Wembley.
Yeah, not a bad one, that, is it? That's come up in regular conversation the last few days, as you can imagine, with the draw on Wednesday night. And we're very excited. You can, I suppose, but for me, you couldn't really be a sports fan without wanting to be at Wembley. Whether you're a football fan, any fan of any sport, Wembley's a pinnacle, isn't it? And certainly in the UK. And the chance for a club in the second tier of the competition, which ultimately we are, to be able to go to Wembley and have a day out of Wembley. Well, I think the phrase around Wembley was what dreams were made for, wasn't it, or something like that. So, two teams are going to be there. Two teams in Championship are going to be there, and we just, really hope that we're one of them. But, there's 80 minutes to go yet. But that would be very special. That would then be the second best stadium that I'd been to in 2021.
Jon, thank you very much for your time. We wish you and the Knights well, not just with Wembley, but with getting fans back into the stadium. And fingers crossed the roadmap does pan out the way it's supposed to do. And if we don't see you at Wembley, we'll see you at the LENR Community Stadium in York very soon indeed, hopefully.
Gents, you are more than welcome. So I look forward to seeing you soon.
Jon Flatman there, who is a wise recruiter, obviously, of players and of backroom people, because he didn't give me a job at Wakefield about 5 years ago, which was a great decision for him and for me. And indeed, it turns out the club, as history has told us. And if I had have got the job at that point, we wouldn't have had that time where I was told off and had public criticism on Twitter for accurately reporting the words of a player. So we'd have missed out on that moment. And where's he now?
Exactly.
Where am I? I'm on the internet, I'm on YouTube. Lots of sense spoke by Jon Flatman, and lots of positivity about York, which is good. I remember, because I lived in Selby as a kid. These were the days when I didn't know rugby league existed, but now there's an opportunity for North Yorkshire to actually be aware of rugby league more. I guess the Raldale York didn't have much of a budget in those days, but lots of positivity. We need to talk about this Championship TV deal, Phil, because it's another one of these stories which has snuck out. But you remember, was it a year or so ago, we were sat above the shop and the League Express had a very exciting story about Channel 4 were interested in rugby league, which of course has led to absolutely nothing. And now we've got reports that Premier Sports might be interested in taking on the Championship. And I say taking on rather than buying the rights, because I would be of the opinion that perhaps the rights are worth not a lot. Certainly not to a broadcaster who, I put the figures out yesterday. The highest rated programme last week was 150,000, but that was for Rangers versus Celtic in the Scottish Cup. They don't get anywhere near that every other week. And in the top 15 programmes, the 15th rated programme's got 1,000 viewers. Now, I'm not saying that Championship Rugby League, live Championship Rugby League would only get 1,000 viewers. Of course not. But you're asking people to pay another £10 a month, which, it's if you're a rugby league fan, all you do is watch rugby league all the time. That's fine. You pay for Sky, you pay for Watch NRL, and you pay for all the games in our league, and now you've got a tenner to pay for Premier Sports and whatever. But in a lot of households, people want Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Sky, Virgin, whatever, blah, 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 blah. There's lots of ways of spending your money. And another £10 added on top of that in the current situation, some people might not want to do so. Before we even get on to the fact that during the last World Cup, when we were promised everything and weren't given Tonga and New Zealand, which we all really look forward to, I don't see the excitement here for a deal which I don't want to say any, because that's a ridiculous thing to say, but doesn't bring many more new eyes to the sport. I just don't see it.
I think there are two issues for me, and you've sort of picked up on both of them there. One is, what would a company like Premier, who has very little money itself, pay to have that sport on their channel? And if the answer is very little or nothing, then what do you get out of the deal? There are other ways of getting exposure for the championship that John was just talking about, that and hiding it away in a corner. I think that's the first thing. It has to be with a broadcaster that is prepared to put money in, or it has to have an audience that is so big that you'd be prepared to give that away for virtually nothing. So you are talking perhaps a terrestrial channel there. I think the other thing is about spectators, and you are absolutely right. We are being asked now to pay for everything. So would bringing Premier Sport and an additional subscription detract from people perhaps buying into our league? Now, again, the RFL has quite rightly trumpeted the figures that our league is getting. It's providing an extremely valuable service behind closed doors. That is going to change a little bit when fans are allowed back into stadium. Excuse me, but I assume they're still going to be showing games on our league, and you would imagine charging for them. Well, we've also got coming on stream Sports Flick, and they may be showing games from the North American Rugby League, whatever that might be, in whatever format it might be. But that's a subscription as well that some people might want to buy into. There is a finite amount of money that the Rugby League fan has. A lot of them have allowed their season tickets to roll over and have kindly donated a year's season ticket money to their club. We know how hard it is for a lot of people out there. And the one thing that you can guarantee is that extra subscriptions go first rather than are the first priority on their list of things they're going to invest in. So it's all very well saying we could put it on Premier Sport, but that to me seems like a deal that has a couple of major hindrances behind it. And if John is right that you need to showcase before you can amortize, then that's not the showcase that necessarily is going to give you best value. And as we talked about netball, and I know it's something that you're very well aware of, a lot of those games have been on YouTube. They are the same quality of coverage and production standard as the matches on Sky. A lot of the highlights from those YouTube games are then shown on Sky, or perhaps even used as filler programs during the week. So there is like there is with the Women's Super League and the Twitch relationship, there is almost a case for saying put the championship for free on YouTube, and a broadcaster can have it for nothing because you produced it to a certain standard, and they can repackage it into either game highlights or a magazine show or whatever that might be. And I just think that's a better option than necessarily leaking the fact that the panacea of little Sky money going to the Championship and League One from here on in is fans paying more to a subscription channel that they wouldn't watch anything else on. It's a very, very thin ice argument.
I mean, I'm only using a sample of you when we talk about netball, but you saying that you've watched games when, 2 months ago you didn't have a clue what's going on and still don't have a clue what's going on necessarily, is tantamount to the fact that it's on Sky, it's visible. And if you go onto your Sky box and you flick through the channels and maybe you start on BBC One and eventually you'll find something to watch. The same goes for Sky Sports. You put 401 on, right, but I don't want to watch the football. I don't want. I'll watch this on Sky, whatever. No one's going to go down and find Premier Sport 1 and go, it's Bradford versus Swinton. With no disrespect to either club, it's just an example of a fixture. It's just not going to happen. And I think the women's figures on Twitch are interesting. Now, we've only got a sample size of 2. And I don't know what we learned from the first week, because it's a bit like when Bradford were on Proper Sport and 10,000 people watched the game against York, and the figures weren't that high again, but there's still obviously plenty of interest in the matches. When I flicked the game on Sunday, I think there was about 800, 900 people watching. And bear in mind, this is 800, 900 people watching 2 teams who weren't in Super League last year. No one knows who any of the players are. You know, in effect, it's 2 northern towns playing against each other on a worldwide platform. So, yeah, you've got a potential audience of everyone apart from North Korea, whatever. So 900 doesn't sound too many. But there are, celebrities on Twitch who don't get that many viewers watching them do whatever they do. So the fact that there is an audience, yes, it's free, right? Great. There's nothing wrong with it being free. You can monetize it in the future. And I see more of a future in putting something on Twitch or on the Our League app than a TV deal where how much of that £10 is going directly into the sport? At least we know when you buy a game on Our League, all the money, yes, obviously the production company gets a cut, but whatever, but the majority, I assume, is going back into rugby league in some form or another, where it's the RFL or the clubs. And I just don't see, there aren't going to be any new eyes here that we can't get in other methods, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitch, whether it's whatever. We're living in a streaming world. That's the big thing now. Yes, of course, there are going to be still big TV rights deals for major sport. I'm sure the Premier League will get billions and billions of pounds next time, but we're comparing apples and oranges. If we take the example that the Pro 14, which is the top division for Irish, Scottish and Welsh clubs, well, not clubs, but whatever they are, franchises, and they got a deal of £5 million over whatever their time was with Premier, but that's the top division, and even then it's not the Heineken Cup or whatever. So we're talking about second division rugby league, which has never had in the history of televised rugby league a massive TV deal. I don't know why people suddenly believe now that it will get millions of pounds. The entertainment value is irrelevant. It's great that the games are good. It's great that the games are close, or there's some great tries, there's some great players, whatever. But it's irrelevant because British basketball might be entertaining or British ice hockey might be entertaining, but they haven't got TV deals. But British basketball, I mean, here's where, and I don't know if it's possible or not, British basketball has their games on the BBC website. Is there a deal to be made there? I don't know. We got Women's Challenge Cup final on the BBC website. Still to this day, I'm not sure how we conned them into doing that. But we proved we could provide a stream that was good enough, and we got it on there. And if we can do that, then certainly the RFL can do that with the Championship or whatever, or to somebody else. I just think people are easily seduced by the idea of television, and everything has to be on TV. And that's not the world we're living in now.
No, and I think we've also got to be careful about overexposing the fan to expense, because I am absolutely conscious of the fact that there are a lot of people struggling economically at the moment in what we might term our major area. You know, the north of England is not awash with spare cash. I know there's quite a few people who are not paying for a foreign holiday this year that have put a little bit more money into their house because they've been spending a lot more time there. I know that quite a lot of people who might have eaten out once a week or once a month haven't been doing that, but I think they'll find their takeaway Deliveroo bill has probably gone up commensurately. There isn't a lot of spare cash in the part of the world where these championship teams play. So to ask them to pay more again and possibly get an R-League pass, however that's going to work, for a game and or pay for Premier Sports, we've got to be very careful that we don't go to the goose that lays the golden egg so many times that it stops.
And as I pointed out on Twitter last week, don't take everything we say as criticisms or slights against whatever you like. They are constructive thoughts.
It's commercial reality. It's not a comment whatsoever on the quality of the product or the teams that are playing. It's the absolute fact of where we are with the nature of a fractured broadcasting environment and the fact that the Super League deal is going to be less, to the point where the trickle down, such as it was, is not going to be there. And you have to be a little bit more creative about how you're going to generate cash. And that's why it was refreshing to hear Jon say, we'll deal with whatever we have to deal with, and not we expect a handout of similar proportions. And unfortunately, once your major prime broadcaster cuts off the bulk of your supply of funding, you can't just go to a different one and tap in. You can't just ring up Channel 4 and go, but we've got a great product. It doesn't work like that. What we have proved with our league is that we can come up with really good production values for matches that would stand the test of transferring to other broadcast environments. And if we can do that and pay for that, there's a chance that we can give bigger exposure to the competition by offering it out rather than waiting for a rights to come in, which probably is not going to happen. And if we can offer it out in such a way that it's an attractive package in the same way, and we mentioned it 100 times, Italian football used to be, the NFL when it first came over here on Channel 4 used to be, that rugby union currently is on Channel 5, all of which is paid for production, but is giving the sponsors of those teams and that competition the will to recommit to their side of the bargain. So, if you are Betfred, and your decision on whether to sponsor the Championship and or League One is coming up for renewal, or you need to find somebody to replace Betfred because the betting world is now going to be denied some opportunities of sponsorship, and you've got somebody, I don't know, like a Ron Seal who might be interested in sponsoring the Championship, and they go, well, what do we get for it? And you go, well, we've got all these media outlets that are covering the sport, and you get them to pay into your sport because their name is seen in enough outlets. That might be the way you have to do it from now on.
You go to Channel 4 and say, speaking of attractive packages, it's rugby league crossed with naked attraction. That's what also we can do. Naked rugby league. Not featuring Keith Chegwin because that was Channel 5.
The lingerie league,
which does exist.
Was the most ridiculous concept I've ever heard.
Yes.
Does it still exist? It shouldn't exist.
Yeah,
if it does, it shouldn't.
It's rebranded, but it does exist. It does exist. In the Championship on the field, London beat Oldham 38-24. Batley, who I actually predicted last week in an amazing coincidence, beat Widnes 48-16. Not only beat Widnes, but thrashed Widnes 48-16.
In the second half. Again, close in the first half, but absolutely ran away with it in the second. That would be a concern for Widnes, I think, because when again we looked at who would be the front runners, likely to be probably chasing the gap that was left when Lee were moved up. We had Widnes down there as one of those teams, and they are in a relegation position after 3 games, which is nothing. 3 games is a ridiculously paltry amount, but sometimes it's how you get beaten. And I think the word coming back from that game was not a huge amount to build on in that second half. So they're going to need to turn that around relatively quickly. And of course, they play Swinton this week, who are below them in the league. So again, a massive 4-point match at the bottom of the Championship this weekend.
And you could say for Swinton, they were expected to lose to York, perhaps not by the scoreline they did, 64-16, but they weren't expected to win that game at Widnes. That is...
I think Swinton's mitigation would be they played a full-time Super League team the week before, and I don't think we expected them to come up with a back-to-back performance against one of the strongest teams in the division again the following week. So not surprised. The most important thing for Swinton is they've secured their future at Haywood Road for the next 3 years. So That's good news.
At least one team beginning with S in Greater Manchester has got their home secure. That's the good news there. Featherstone beat Whitehaven 48-14. Again, that was close at half-time, wasn't it? Toulouse winning away at Halifax 44-34. But they don't play for 3 weeks now, is it, or something?
Well, there is stories breaking that they are seriously looking at playing some of their home games over here over an interim period of time, just to get those fixtures played. They're not playing this week, they're not playing next week, but I think May the 8th they may have to play a home game over here.
Newcastle got a win against Sheffield, which is very impressive with the way Sheffield have been travelling this year, 24-16. And Bradford celebrated Danny Bruff's 503rd career game with a 35-14 win over their landlords and his former club, the Dewsbury Rams. So, of course, he ended up having
a milestone.
Binned off by Wakefield. Yeah, 503, amazing. I mean, some players will never get to 502, but 503, oof, what a
It's player. Almost worth having a commemorative shirt for that.
Yeah. How did I don't know. I can just keep.
What I would say as well is great to see PDRL back this weekend. A couple of games, and just the look on the faces of everyone we either saw in highlights or on pictures, outstanding.
Kind of snuck out there, didn't it? I wasn't really aware until late last week it was back, but it's back, which is good.
Great game between Leeds and Wakefield, I think, that ended 6-6. Not that the result is important at this stage. It's getting people back playing and enjoying. Community game friendly started as well this weekend. Great. Again, see some fabulous footage on social media of so many teams getting out there. And the indication would be that numbers are actually up. And one of the worries was that, having had almost a year off for most teams, that it'd be difficult to entice people back to the sport. But certainly at youth level, the numbers have been pretty encouraging, and a number of teams that have registered and are playing again is a testament to what we've missed, and great to see, and wonderful that so many of the teams now have great use of social media as well to get their message over there, and wonderful.
There seems to be a lot more stories about wheelchair rugby league at the moment as well, which is good ahead of the World Cup. But make sure people know who these people are. They're going to be watching and cheering on come the autumn, which is still on track.
200 days, yes.
Not 203 days.
Still, as John was telling us, there are still hurdles and obstacles to get over, and we need to be wary of the fact that just because there are dates out there doesn't mean that the minute you hit that date, everything is going to change. There's still conditions attached to all of them. And I think he, as a chief executive, knows that there's at least 2 or 3 plans in place at every club as to how you deal with whatever they're going to be allowed to do from central government. But the encouragement for the World Cup, I think, is England announcing a friendly against Fiji the week before now at Rochdale. I think that's an indication that there's a real genuine feel that the World Cup is going to go ahead in a way that is befitting of its status.
And that's another great story, isn't it? That people probably won't be aware of. Well, I don't say probably, but a lot of people wouldn't be aware of the connections between Rochdale and Fiji and why that game's important. And we look forward to that coming up ahead of the World Cup. We've got to get these stories out there and tell people all about the weird bits of history to do with our sport and the various competing nations. It is one of the things that's keeping us going this year, is the carrot of the World Cup. And I need to come up with a new phrase, because I keep saying carrot at the end of a stick a lot. I need to find something new for that. But this is the point where I always say, is there anything else going on? And I'm not sure there is.
I think we've just about covered everything.
I mean,
what
I will say, people will be straight onto Rugby League forums after your exclusive of the TV deal figure. People will be very excited about that. I heard on 4020 they said.
I don't think so.
Getting £3.50 from Sky.
Nobody should listen to anything I say ever anyway, which I think is a given.
Well, they do, and more full them for having listened to us for the last hour or whatever. Just listen to the bit in the middle, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, hopefully I'll be. I said this last week, and I didn't go because they moved the games to Warrington. Hopefully, I will go watch some live rugby league this weekend if I'm allowed in. That's going to be the big test. Got to pass the temperature test and everything else to be allowed in to go watch the rugby.
Although not at Hull KR last week.
He just wandered in. Just wandered in off the street.
No, there wasn't one. I think you had to do your questionnaire, your health questionnaire before you left, but no temperature check on arrival.
In other dramatic news.
One thing I would say is I do believe. Well, I was just going to say I do believe our good friends at TalkSport 2 will be running a phone-in again this weekend after their coverage of the Huddersfield Leeds game. So if you want to get more say on national media, then ring in.
You've got to use it. You've got to use these things.
Our good people that listen to us. Yeah, they were really pleased with the first one, so they're going to give it a second one this weekend. If by about whatever it is, 4:30, 4:45 on Sunday afternoon, you've got something to say, then ring in and say it.
Right. So if anyone can manage to get on, and not to derail the programme, but if the result goes to Huddersfield on Sunday, if you can get on and say, Mark, our Leeds in crisis, then I think I've got a T-shirt here and we'll send you it. But if you can get on and do it, but don't break the programme because I don't want to get in trouble. Don't do that. But just behave. But listen to it. And I think it's important. People don't realise that it's important that you support things because you don't know who is paying attention to the support you're giving them. And if you support it, there might be more of them in the future.
Yeah.
Other than that,
and there's a whole summer of rugby league that becomes more attractive if they think more and more people are listening to it and contributing to it.
Ahead of an exciting World Cup, which, although I'm sure it'll be all on the BBC, but oranges are not the only fruit.
They said they want to do all the stories around it.
That's good. Well, that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is important.
Yep.
Other than that, I have to say, having mentioned basketball being on the BBC website earlier, maybe we could give Rodney Walker a call because he apparently runs that in shock news to everyone. It's only because I've just seen him on the telly on the snooker because they showed some old clips when he was running that into the ground, running that well. But it's all good. It's all good. That is it. Thank you very much, Jon Flatman.
Don't depress yourself at the end. Leave on an upbeat note.
Well, no, I watched a YouTube video at the weekend of people at the fun fair at Wakefield, and I thought, I've not been to the Mobile Rocket for over a year now. It's weird. But we'll all be back there. So we'll all be back in our various places soon. And not normality, but something resembling it will be here. And it'll be good. And we'll appreciate things more for about a week, and then we'll all go, it's all rubbish.
Sack the coach, get rid of the players, ban them all, referees are rubbish.
Very skillful there. Phil, thank you. We will be back at some point next week. I don't know with who or when, but we'll be back because the people demand it.
Well, hopefully in May, if things do go to plan, we may even be live as opposed to not live.
Which will be very interesting to see how the audience reacts to that. For many and various reasons. But until then, enjoy your rugby league. Harry Gresham does.